about wildlife rehabilitation and the new and different knowledges that are constructed through that practice, which is a practice based in love and compassion. And I'm going to be focusing specifically on baby birds. So wildlife rehabilitation is something that I've been doing as a practice for the learning that I've been learning at CIIS in the Integral Ecology Program, PCC. And so what is wildlife rehabilitation? Well, wildlife rehabilitation is the private practice, completely private, not funded by state or federal agencies, but is certified by state and federal agencies, of helping and caring for wild animals. And nobody else does this job. Veterinarians don't do it, state and government agencies don't do it, so it's pretty much located to wildlife rehabilitators who tend to work pretty much volunteer. There are some who get paid. It's always very low income. It's always either their nonprofit that runs the center either pays them, or they run primarily on donations. So why do people do it? Why do people become wildlife rehabilitators? And that was one of the questions that I asked in my thesis research. And what I found was that people do it for two reasons. One of those is a sense of obligation, which implies an expanding social justice that includes non-human beings. So a lot of the wildlife rehabilitators I interviewed said, we do this because we feel responsible. We feel responsible for taking care of animals who have been affected and impacted by the human species in negative ways. And then the second answer they gave was love. So wildlife rehabilitators tend to be people who love animals, who care about animals, who feel compassion for animals in a very deep sense. And a lot of the time it involves empathy, a sense of empathetic connection with other animals, or just an appreciation for being near them. So because of this connection and because of this compassion, wildlife rehabilitators have a very unique perspective on wildlife. And the image that they construct and build through their practice of wildlife is very, very, very different from other practices that work with wildlife, like scientist, biologist research, conservation research, laboratory. All of those practices construct a very distant perspective of wildlife. But wildlife rehabilitators work very closely and work from this place of love and compassion to help the animal, or the non-human animal, and help the non-human animal individual specifically. And this distinguishes it from conservation biology, which is the goal of conservation biology is often the species rather than the individual, and doesn't focus on an animal like an injured possum who's found on the side of the road. No one's there to help that injured possum except rehabilitators. So I'm going to focus on three areas that have really jumped out at me as areas that nobody else in the world knows anything about, for the most part, except people who do this work of helping wildlife. And those three areas are involve baby birds. So the first is renesting, and I'll talk about what that means. The second is raising baby birds, and the third is releasing them back into the wild as healthy adults. So this quote, those who wish to pet and baby wildlife love them, but those who respect their natures and wish to let them live their natural lives love them more, is the introduction to one of my mentors' handbooks, a handbook on reuniting and renesting wild baby raptors. And raptors are eagles, owls, falcons, birds like that. And what she's implying through this quote is just that more of I don't know, I think we learn about this in our relationships too, where there's the possessive kind of love and then there's the free kind of love. And wildlife rehabilitators really, more than any other practice I found that works with animals, put the non-human animals' interests above their own. And that's really important, and it's a really huge distinction, and it's actually really, really challenging to do that because it involves a lot of self-awareness, a lot of distinguishing between the other's needs and the self's needs, which is a huge thing and very, very difficult often. So I think learning how to do that in itself is a huge knowledge. So what is renesting and reuniting? Well, So often when we get in a wildlife rehabilitation center, baby raptors, we're able to take them and reunite them with their parents. And we're able to do that with raptors specifically because raptor parents have a very, very strong parenting instinct. And even if the baby's gone out of the nest for 3 or 4 days, the raptor parents will still be there waiting for the babies and looking for them. So it gives us a good chance to reunite them with the parents, which is always better than raising them ourselves. Why is that better? Because parents are able to teach this is a great horned owl baby, to teach this great horned owl baby how to be a great horned owl, much better than we humans are able to teach a great horned owl baby how to be an owl. So I'm going to go through a series of case studies just because I think it's important to carry the voices of these different animals, and I think locating the stories in individual and specific relationships between patients and humans is really important. So this is a great horned owl baby. The person who brought her to us found her on the ground outside of her house. She was under a tree hopping around, and we initially advised her just to stay with it and watch it, because normally when owls are found on the ground, they're actually okay. Their parents are watching them. It's a normal stage of development to be on the ground, not able to fly. It's kind of the learning how to be an adult stage. And so we just advised her to watch it, make sure the parents were feeding it, and if not, to definitely give us a call. So what happened was she camped out with the owl, and she wanted to protect it from coyotes that were around, but at the same time, I think she also protected it from its parents. And so she watched it for a couple nights and said, "Oh my gosh, there's no parents, I don't know what to do." And we said, "Okay, we'll bring it in." And by that time, the baby had, become fairly emaciated. Babies can become emaciated fairly quickly and dehydrated. So we fed her, gave her a bunch of water, and then the next night, the landowner called and said, "Okay, the parents are around. They're making lots of calls. They're looking for her. What should we do?" And so we said, "Well, great. That's amazing. Parents are present. That gives us a really, really good chance of reuniting this baby with the parents." So we consulted with my mentor, who had the quote that I introduced this topic with, and she said, "Well, it's hard to tell if that baby is still a nestling or if it's actually a brancher, and a brancher will hop around on branches and doesn't actually need to be in the nest anymore." But it was hard to tell which, so we were like, "Okay, well, we'll build a nest." So we built her a nest, and we hired a climber, and we had the climber put the nest up in the tree and put the baby in the nest. And this is kind of the middle of the process that you're seeing here. The baby's going into that bucket. I'm going to put a towel on top of her. I cover the bucket with a towel and then rope that up to our climber to put in the nest. So we did all of that. It went really successfully. Sometimes the baby will jump out of the nest, and that's always hard because then you have to get her and put her back. But she didn't. She stayed, and everything went great. And then the next day, the landowner called and said, "Well, she's down." So what do we do at that point? Well, obviously this baby is not a nestling anymore. It definitely wants to be outside of the nest, so we've determined that. So we went to pick her up, and she was hopping down a busy road very calmly. We were freaking out. She was very calm. So we picked her up and came up with another plan, which was that, okay, since she's a brancher, she obviously doesn't need to be in the nest, but she does need to be protected from the busy road. So we located a little area that was fenced in away from the road and put her there. And 2 days later, the landowner called and said, "Okay, the parents have come visit her. They're feeding her. They're with her." And a month later, they saw her flying away. So beautiful success story. So what did we learn from that experience? We learned a lot. So we learned about this individual owl. She had definitely a will of her own. She was definitely communicating to us, "Hey, I don't want to be in this nest. I definitely, need to be outside of this nest." And we were receiving that communication. So I think a lot of the time it's easy to say, okay, it's really difficult to communicate with other animals. You don't really know what they're saying. But what's really actually easy to hear is preference. So this young owl was expressing a preference to not be in the nest, and we wanting her best interest, respected that and tried to work with her to get her back to her parents in a way that was safe. What else did we learn? We learned how to build a nest, a raptor nest, which is actually very challenging. You need lots of foliage. I have a picture here. Oh, that's hard to see. So we used a laundry basket, and we put a perch in it, and we covered it with foliage, and we made sure it was deep enough so that she wouldn't just fall out. This is a red-tailed hawk that we did a similar reuniting with, and So basically we learned what the baby needs, what the parents need, and how to facilitate a communication that occurs then between both of them. And that's actually really challenging. It's taken 40 plus years for us to figure it out. And mostly that's just because, okay, we didn't know that raptors have such a strong parenting instinct. We didn't know that they would linger by the nest. Most of us did know that if you touch a bird, it's still okay to put it back in the nest. It doesn't actually give it human cooties, and the parents still will come and take care of it. That's an urban legend. But we didn't really know how successful it would be until we tried it. So yeah, we learned how to basically be temporary parents or foster parents for this owl. And we learned that even more with these cases. So the second area of knowledge that rehabbers have is about raising baby owls, or I'm sorry, baby birds. And I only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go quickly through these next two. But so this is a baby sparrow nest. We have the nest, and we used it for raising the baby sparrows. The syringe has a special nutrient blend that's really good for babies. Contrary to popular opinion, they don't do well with cereal or milk. They actually need, it's kind of a gross mixture of insects and cat food and other really icky things blended together, and doesn't smell good at all. But they love it, and it works, and it raises healthy babies. This is a crow baby. They're really, really cute and interactive. Crows and jays. This is a baby jay. Sorry for the fuzziness. It's very cute fuzziness. So the crows and baby jays tend to be really intelligent in a way that's similar to human intelligence. So they're a lot more interactive. A lot of the interns found a lot more joy relating with them and raising with them than other babies. They needed a lot of toys to play with and a lot of enrichment things, and they learned from each other. The one on the left here was actually a very weird jay who wouldn't eat when we first got him. He didn't know how to gape. And so most birds, when they sense someone near, they'll just open their mouths and lean back and make this very loud noise that indicates that they want to be fed. And this guy didn't know how to do it. He just didn't eat. And so we had to force feed him, or we force fed him in order to keep him alive. And he just wasn't learning, and it was really, really stressful. And then having the stressful experience on top of everything else made it a very negative experience for him. So we didn't really know what to do, and then we decided to try putting him in with other babies and see what happened. And he learned from them pretty quickly, and he approximated gaping noises. He never really quite got it like they did. He would make these very weird noises. But he got the opening his mouth bit, although he would kind of open his mouth, and then you fed him, and then he'd run away. So he was very weird. But we were able to learn how to be a parent for this baby jay. And with raising babies, of course, we learn even more how to be a parent. We learn stages of development, what they need to eat, how much they need to eat, what's proper weight, what's proper nutrition. All of these things are important things that no human else in our country really knows about. And it's starting to spread to conservation activities where people are raising an endangered species of crow and need to know techniques how to do that properly. And there's a lot of borrowing from wildlife rehab knowledge that's happening. So this is Micro Baby. He's a brown pelican baby. So now I'm going to talk about releasing. And releasing wild babies is really important too, and really difficult to do correctly for some species. And so for crows and jays and pelicans and swans and raptors, there's a huge tendency for the baby to imprint on humans. There's a little window of time between when they open their eyes and while their brain's developing, when they kind of form their identity. And if they see humans, they form an identity to human. And now that doesn't mean they're obviously aware that they're not in a human body, but they develop these cultural and behavioral ways or methods that are similar to humans. So Micro is an interesting story about imprinting. I'm just going to go through really quick. So Micro was the tiniest baby we got. This was responding to the oil spill of 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico by BP. And Micro came in covered in oil. He also came in with a broken wing, probably trying to escape the oil. And that's another picture. We washed him of oil, got all the oil off, repaired his wing. And because he was so teeny tiny, we had to hand feed him. Like, we couldn't just throw him fish like other pelicans. So everyone loved to do that. It was like everyone's favorite job was to feed Micro. And he was very easy and very loving, and he would really enjoy the attention. But eventually, it became a problem when he grew up to a stage of development. He should have been acting more like a pelican, and he really wasn't. He was acting like a human in a pelican body. And he saw other pelicans, and he kind of ignored them. And he saw humans, and he would run towards them. And he wasn't learning how to eat by himself. And so this was obviously a problem. Like, either he would have had to go to a zoo or some other enclosed captive environment, but we couldn't release him at that point. So we developed a program called Scary Human. First, we put him in with other pelicans. It didn't really work. He didn't learn anything because he shunned them. So Scary Human involved 3 times a day, volunteers going in and being very scary and threatening towards Micro. And it was heartbreaking. I'm sure it was heartbreaking for him, too, to have these people he thought of as his own kind and his parents, suddenly turning scary and aggressive. But this is what I mean about putting his best interest above our own. It was just the one thing that we knew how to do that would keep him safe when he went out into the wild. So Scary Human commenced, and it was very sad and heartbreaking. But eventually, a month later, he no longer responded to humans, started to bond with the pelicans, and started eating on his own. So we measured his weight, we measured his health, and in September of 2010, we released him. And he was able to fly away, and since then we've seen him 3 times. He has a band, so he can be identified, and he's doing really well. He now has a mate, which is amazing for a pelican that started out thinking he was a human. So just to wrap up, why is this important and interesting? And I'll be very quick. Well, it's interesting because this is a knowledge that nobody has. So just the fact that it's different and unique is important. In addition, wildlife rehabilitators really have the most ethical relationships with other animals that I've found in terms of a profession or career in our human world. And I think that in itself is an amazing form of knowledge to have. I think it's a wonderful model for any situation where we're working with wild animals, and it provides a lot of important information on nurturing and caring for them that is now applicable to conservation methods. Like, so if we're working with, brown pelicans just recently made it off the threatened list, but like crows and jays, there's tons of them. So why is that important? But endangered crows and jays, like that starts to become more useful and more important on a wider scale. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Max. Very beautiful and inspiring. A quick question for Max or a comment?
Yeah, Josh.
When you said that we shouldn't, there's a whole story about not touching them because they'll get human cooties. Is that true for other animals, and do you have general recommendations if we encounter a creature that seems out of place, what we should do?
Yeah, so definitely that's true for all animals. Like, there's really, you can handle any animal, bird, mammal, whatever, and its parents will accept it back, definitely. For babies, it's really, really hard because a lot of the time babies are there because they're on the ground because they're actually learning how to be an adult, and that's that weird stage I was talking about where it's like they're not flighted yet, they can't fly, but they can hop, and they can hop up to other branches to be safe, and their parents are actually monitoring them. They're doing it from a distance, and if they see you there, they won't come near. So if you find baby birds and they have their feathers and they're kind of hopping around, then it's really best to just leave them be, because likely if they're doing that, they've made it that far and their parents are watching them. Just to be sure, you can always like do a little stakeout and like hide and check and see if the parents come. If they're featherless, then it is a problem. They need warmth, but their parents are still likely there. So one of the best things to do is make a little nest. You can do it with like a box and tissue paper or grass and tie it to a tree, like whatever the nearest tree is. If you don't see the nest, if you can see the nest, you can put it back, and that's really easy. For fawns, also, it's a big one. Like a lot of people, well, not in this area, I guess, but here it's mostly birds that people find and bring in. But for fawns, like their parents will leave them for hours and only come actually twice a day to check in, and their strategy for survival is just to hide and be still. So, yeah, I actually can send more information out about that. But those are the basics. Mostly it's good to leave them alone unless they're obviously injured and obviously in need of help. And you can always do stakeouts and see, but the parents are always the best way to take care of them.
Thank you. Max.